Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm good.
Are we in the midst of a major cyber attack?
Yeah, what's going
Spotify
on?
was down this morning.
It
Apple was
seems like
down.
it.
Zoom's down now. Uh,
Uh,
Remote workers are in shambles.
yeah, it's a disaster. I mean, I guess everyone was just taking the day off.
I appreciate you guys have a backup plan. This is great.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, can you give me the high level on the report? It seems like you published right before there were some changes. Give me the high level and how
And
things are developing.
and in all, half joking, half serious, but do you deserve some credit for
Yeah.
the shift here?
Yeah, it seems on the credit side, I don't think can take much. It looks like there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes. I will say the fix that we have now is just a short-term thing, and there's a lot of long-term stuff that needs to happen. But to, I guess, back up as to what's actually going on here. So, yeah, it's been a pretty whirlwind 24 hours for the AI chip export controls. So you guys might know in early 2024, NVIDIA launched this new AI chip, this AI GPU called the H20. It was specifically designed for the Chinese market, so it was designed to stick within the computational limits that were defined through export controls. But it turns out that the H20 actually had great performance for doing inference, so running AI model as opposed to training it. And this resulted in a situation where actually it was really good at inference and even better than some chips that are already banned. And this all happened during this sort of 2024 trend of inference for AI models becoming way more important for capability growth through, models like O1 and DeepSeek using test time compute, as well as other techniques like synthetic data generation, RL. So basically a bunch of these sold like crazy. Over 1 million were shipped in 2024. And so this is like a really big deal. We had inference compute flowing freely from the US to China during this period where inference compute was becoming the key strategic input to AI development. And people like myself were going, wow, Washington should really be reacting to this. But they were really slow to react. And it became sort of a couple of things that we learned last week. One, there was a meeting between Trump and Jensen, the NVIDIA CEO, at Mar-a-Lago, which is apparently a $1 million a head dinner. And after that dinner, the White House reportedly reversed course on any plans to control the H20 chip. And then last week, we also learned that Chinese companies had placed massive new orders for these H20s, so over 1.3 million so far this year. And this is recently, over just the last week, prompted this a lot of calls, including from us, to stop these orders going through. And yesterday, it became clear that BAS is the Bureau of Industry and Security, who does export controls, has taken action on this. I just threw a lot of info at you, but that's just sort of where we're at now. Can talk more about sort of what we think should happen next. But yeah, it's a pretty crazy situation at the moment.
I'm curious, what's your broad stance on NVIDIA at the moment? Jensen has obviously been in a tough space of being an American, yet at the same time needing to represent the interests of NVIDIA and its shareholders. China's a massive market, and do you imagine that everybody just needs to move on from China and focus on servicing demand in the U.S. and our allies, or how do you think it should be approached at this point?
Yeah, it's a tough situation for NVIDIA. I think the line that they use is, if you set the speed limit at 60 and we're going at 55, that should be fine, right? We're just trying to stick by the parameters that you set in these export controls and sell chips that are compliant. And then you have the government sort of, making these big changes to sort of, after NVIDIA has designed these chips and is ready to start selling to the market, making these big changes that prevent their market access overall. So, if I'm a big NVIDIA shareholder, I'm pretty annoyed about this, right? I'm okay, let's have better sort of proactive policy making around this stuff. I'm pretty sympathetic with that perspective. But yeah, I think realistically, NVIDIA is a publicly traded company that is access to their revenue. They want to sell chips into China. They're not sort of seeing the same national security concerns that a lot of people in Washington are seeing. And to be frank, a lot of people in the AI industry directly as well. I think there's some question marks around whether they have been fully responsible with sort of doing their due diligence for shipments that are going into China and ensuring that controlled chips aren't being smuggled and that they're sort of complying with the letter of the law. But overall, I think we just need clearer policy making ahead of time so it's easier for them to make these decisions.
Do you have a sense of what the black market for GPUs looks like? I imagine, you guys made a recommendation to add sort of geolocation to these high performance chips. and I'm curious if you have any insight into how chips are flowing around the world in a way that may not be aligned to
Yeah,
U.S.
so
national
we've been
interests.
tracking this for the past couple of years. So we put out a report in late 2023 that sort of looked at this question of, okay, we've got these chip export controls now. What sort of scale of smuggling should we expect? And at the time, based on sort of news reports, mainly the sort of cases that were being surfaced were just sort of single digit number of GPUs at the time. So at most sort of like, a single server, like 8 GPUs being smuggled at once. And now sort of like a bunch of reports came out last year that this is now just a huge industry. Some estimates is there's sort of around 100,000 GPUs went into China last year, controlled GPUs. Some people think it's much more. There's individual cases that have been uncovered where there's over 20,000 GPUs being smuggled at once. So this is some pretty serious shipment sizes, like going into the hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. And there's likely a lot we just don't know, especially for these large orders, which are sort of happening through professional operations behind the scenes. And in as much as it is happening, this, shouldn't be a surprise. China has a long history of smuggling controlled goods despite sanctions and export controls. And, it's proven that they were instrumental in helping to smuggle chips to Russia over the last 2 years to support the war in Ukraine, despite sort of US sanctions. So this would be like pretty on brand with the China playbook for this kind of thing.
How far behind do you think that China's domestic chips really are? Right, we just did an entire backstory on SMIC and Huawei and things like that for our audience, but and we had Aaron Ginn on the show yesterday talking about how the gap in capabilities is maybe not as significant as companies like NVIDIA or TSMC would have people believe, but I'd love to get a sense from you of how wide the capability gap is.
Yeah, so I think there's two dimensions to this. First is the quality of the chips themselves. So if we look at that, how many flops you are able to get a thing per second. The bare bones chips that are coming out now are sort of 3 to 4 years behind the best stuff that's available from NVIDIA. But, that has been a move towards catching up over time. I think export controls are the one thing that could reverse that trend, as these have only really just become effective over the last year or so. The other, and this is sort of a really important factor, is not just how good each chip is, but how many they're able to produce. So, in AI especially, it's not so much a matter of quality of chip that is important. It's also very much quantity, like how many you're able to produce. And there it's where they're really constrained. So being able to produce, high-end chips by the sort of millions like TSMC is able to do is a very serious manufacturing operation, and China doesn't have that level of scalability. And because we have export controls across the stack with tooling and fabs as well, that is one of their key bottlenecks.
What do you think Chinese state investment into semiconductors looks like today? It's obviously they've had 14 separate 5-year plans, I believe, around the industry. So at this point, I don't know how many hundreds of billions or who knows even dollars have gone into the industry, but I imagine this is one of the will just continue to be more and more important every single year.
Yeah, so the way this has been described is
Hello?
to revitalize the American domestic semiconductor manufacturing industry being over time. China is doing this sort of equivalent amount of funding roughly every year to support its own domestic industry.
Tim, we keep losing you. By the way, you're kind of cutting in and out. Maybe the cyber attack has shifted onto your personal mobile device. They really don't want Tim talking right now because he's dropping bombs. But could you repeat? I think we have you now. Could you repeat what you said your potential estimate was?
Chips and Science Act in the States, this big landmark piece of legislation to revitalize the semiconductor industry here, that was about $52 billion as sort of a once-off package that's being distributed over a few years. Best sources I've had say China is distributing like this equivalent amount of money roughly every year to their own semiconductor industry.
How do you think Huawei is, reacting to the tariffs? They're a private company, so I feel like we have a lot less just information on a lot of things, but are they, approaching some of these other companies or, nations that are facing tariffs specifically with kind of like basically trying to take advantage of the situation?
Yeah, I didn't use it. I would be doing in this situation. So similar to how Huawei managed to outmaneuver the United States with 5G, installing base stations all over the world and sort of surpassing the US in that technology. A similar play that they could be executing now is trying to do the same thing on data centers, especially if US equivalents are becoming much more expensive. But now they don't have comparable technologies on the AI chip side, but they certainly do on the lower end stuff. Alibaba Cloud, like Huawei, they all have their own data center offerings that they're sort of pretty aggressively courting the global market with.
Makes a ton of sense. What else? What else are you thinking about right now in terms of now that the news came out that the order's being stalled? What do you think the admin should be focused on, over the next weeks and months?
Yeah, so I think the one big lesson from all of this is that we keep making the same mistakes, in the sense we keep acting too late to really be effective. The thing with export controls is you want to act early, because there's always the risk of things like stockpiling. Like if there's a rumor that export controls are coming and they don't happen for another 6 months, it just gives a huge opportunity for companies to take preventative action, and you can completely ruin the effectiveness of what you're trying to do. This has already happened with HBM memory, so like high-end memory that's really crucial in AI chips. The rumor was leaked that controls for this stuff was coming, and Huawei reportedly stockpiled around 2 million chips worth of this before the new rules came into place. Yeah. We've also been caught blindsided, by DeepSeek, finding out that they trained their models with US chips that were sold before the restrictions, and policymakers being like, wait, what's going on here? The sort of SMIC, when they came up with their 7 nanometer breakthrough in 2023, it turns out they were using secondhand DUV machines, which we have since controlled, but they already got their hands on them. There's been a bunch of cases like this. And really, yeah, we're just being way more reactive than we need to be. I think if you just had a team within government who is technically competent and will actually see and then what's really important, going to be really important for AI technology in 6 months, you could actually be doing much better proactive policy making. So one thing we're advocating for is just setting up this kind of situational awareness capacity within government, so we can get it right next time.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Well, we should have you back on when we have
when we have video
Zoom.
and the internet is not under attack. Apparently, Google Meet is down as well. I don't know exactly what's going on, but story's still developing. But I mean, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do want to have you come back for a much deeper dive into all of this, because it's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's
let's
so
get
much.
it on the calendar today.
Absolutely,
so we can do this properly. But thank you for making it work, Tim, and thank you for following the situation so closely and trying to get us on the right path here.
No worries, guys. Catch you later.
Cheers.
Talk to you later. Bye. Awesome.